Hey, nice to see you. I was expecting you. Please get comfortable. I promise you it's gonna be an interesting session. So, I see you're curious about this game called Lobotomy Corporation. Let me see. South Korean, release 2018, strategy and management and autism coded. Got it. The short explanation of this game is that it's Monsters Inc., but the humans get energy from the monsters instead of the other way around. We play as a manager of the titular corporation, and our job is to meet our daily energy quota by any means possible. Sounds like a silly casual game, right? Well, it isn't. It's hard to articulate the stress and monotony this game forces you to go through, and the fact that nothing short of playing and legitimately completing the game will be able to fully transmit the beautiful message it's trying to tell. But since you so kindly bothered to visit me, I'll try my absolute best to do so. So, how about we start with an overview of the game mechanics? At its core, Lobotomy Corp's gameplay loop is about hiring employees, making them work with abnormalities to gather energy, and gearing them up so they can deal with tougher, more dangerous and more rewarding entities. By working with abnormalities, besides energy, you get your agent's stats to increase, discover information on how to properly handle the creatures, and most importantly become able to extract equipment from them. The more dangerous the entity, the stronger the equipment you are able to get, the power of which is directly proportional to its assigned risk level. From least to most dangerous it goes Sane, Teth, He, Wow and Aleph. Imagine Sane means something like the risks and benefits of drinking coffee, while Aleph means the risks and benefits of smoking World War II gamer fuel. What I mean is that if you don't have the tools to manage Aleph or WoW level entities, they will manage you, and more often than not, they will manage to destroy you. This is because every abnormality has special conditions, which when activated fluctuate their status from stable to unstable, as indicated by this counter in the corner of their container. If this number reaches 0, the entity will start to cause trouble by either breaching containment and going on a killing spree, or by doing something weird, annoying or outright demonic. Also, you don't get much of a choice on what or how many abnormalities you take in, because at the end of each game day you're forced to choose a new entity among 3 to add to your facility. So as the game progresses and the laboratory grows, you'll have to remember more and more arbitrary bits of information to properly micromanage your monstrous tenants and the army of employees that attend them. And micromanage you will, since as you complete work sessions the day advances, and events called Quiplove meltdowns will occur, which will force you to work with random abnormalities under a time limit. If the time limit expires, the corresponding counters will decrease and you lose a bit of energy. The time of day is measured by the number of meltdowns that have happened, with a max level of 10. As the day advances, you'll also have to deal with forced combat encounters called ordeals, which progressively scale in difficulty. Dawn ordeals are annoying, but midnight ordeals are anxiety-inducing. In the later stages of the game, the daily energy quota becomes quite high, making the harder ordeals unavoidable. So if you ever get distracted or careless, you'll soon find yourself in a failure cascade that'll have everyone under you either dead or insane, forcing you to restart the day. Worse, if you find out you fucked up your long-term logistics, you might have to restart the game from the very beginning. Now this might sound needlessly harsh, but going back in time is actually a core mechanic. You see, you're allowed to at any moment either rewind to the start of the work week or to day 1. You will lose the stats you trained, the agents you hired, and equipment attached to the employees, but otherwise you get to keep all the gear, information and upgrades you have unlocked. This is done very intentionally, as without the use of rewinds, it is almost impossible to prepare yourself for some of the challenges that the game poses, which come in the form of missions and suppressions. Missions are self-explanatory. They consist of things like completing a day under a time limit or defeating a certain ordeal. Suppressions are boss events, and they change the game's mechanics against you in a major way. Every department of the company has their own set of missions and their own unique suppression, and as you complete them you're rewarded with permanent upgrades and snippets of the game's story. To achieve the true ending, you gotta clear all missions and suppressions and get to day 50. If you also have every abnormality fully researched, you get a bonus epilogue. Without getting into the fine details, that's the whole gamer shebang. Regarding the story though, I think it's best I explain it to you mixed in with a narration of my playthrough. It would be hard to explain otherwise. But here's what you need to know coming in. Lobotomy Corporation is set in a dystopian world, where humanity has achieved incredible marvels of science and engineering. Bionic augmentations, teleportation, control over the flow of time and more has handedly been achieved. Notable among these technologies are inventions called singularities, products that are capable of violating the laws of physics, though somehow they always require human suffering to be able to function properly. Corporations that succeed in creating and patenting singularities are elevated to the status of wings, each of which governs a district within the city. The city is the last bastion of humanity, a metropolis the size of a small country ruled over by an organization called the Head. In the outskirts and backstreets, lawlessness and poverty reign supreme, so people fight tooth and nail to get hired into a wing and thus enter their nests, the pockets of relative safety within the urban sprawl. As we begin the game, we're told we just got hired as a manager for a branch of Lobotomy Corporation, a company capable of extracting energy from working with physical manifestations of the human unconscious. Our goal is to fulfill our daily energy quotas and expand the underground facility into the shape of the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. There's a lot of Jewish mysticism involved in this game, but it's kind of a chore to explain it, so if you ever get confused, just imagine you're a New York citizen, okay? Upon starting our first day, we meet with Angela, a super powerful AI running most of the company's operations. She's basically our supervisor. Along with her, there's also lesser AIs called Sephiroth, each in charge of one of the company's departments. The organization's 10 departments and teams are divided into 3 layers, upper, middle and lower, and each head of department is named after their spot on the Tree of Life. By clearing more and more days, we slowly get access to more departments, starting from the control team on day 1 and ending at architecture on day 45. By completing a department's missions, we get to meet their corresponding Sephiroth and hear them vent about their traumas. The lower level Sephiroth guard the biggest secrets of the corporation, so you could say that narratively our goal is to get access to the deepest department and find out the truth behind the operation. With this in mind, I started playing the game. My first 20 days were mind-numbingly easy. I was honestly sleepwalking through the game. Some problems popped up here and there because of my lack of experience, but the missions I got were simple, and I was making steady, boring progress. The only exciting thing that happened during this time was that I took on a magical girl abnormality because I am a fucking weeb. She was so emotionally unstable that I had to disown her by rewinding to the start of the week. You see, among all the abnormalities, there is a type I hate the most. They're the ones that get sad when people die, or as in the magical girl's case, when they don't die. Crazy bitch. So if you're really unlucky, you could, theoretically, acquire a monster that goes apeshit when deaths happen, and another that does when they don't. You'd be in trouble whichever way you caught it. But even if you only get the former, you're still in a tough spot, and this is because of the existence of clerks. Clerks are minorly helpful employees that respawn every day and run around the facility being kind of useless. We cannot control them in any fashion, but we're incentivized to keep them alive as we get small bonuses for having them around. The problem is that these fuckers have no sense of self-preservation. There's nothing you can do to prevent them from becoming lunch meat. And if that makes an abnormality sad, you now know how the story goes. These are a few examples of the game's mechanics conspiring against the player, and believe me when I tell you that this game has an abundance of this type of bullshit. For this reason, choosing your abnormalities wisely is the first step in setting yourself up for success, as with the wrong setup you'll struggle or outright become unable to progress, especially in the early game, where your options are more limited. Only by unlocking mid-game upgrades like a managerial murder gun and a hotline to a paramilitary squad do some abnormalities and situations become more reasonable to manage. As it turns out, preventative murder via bullet satisfies everyone involved, probably even the victims themselves. In any case, it's kind of impossible to get to day 50 on your first couple of runs, so keep in mind that as long as you're completing objectives and adding upgrades to your arsenal, you're moving in the right direction. On my first run, I got stuck on day 34, trying to complete Gebura's penultimate mission. She asked me to fight and defeat 3 different Aleph level entities in the span of a single day. At that moment I had only 1 out of 3, and as hard as I tried I could not kill it, so I had to go back to the beginning and train up my lads and gather 3 weak looking Alephs. This annoyed me at first, but it turned out to be a good thing, as it allowed me to calmly finish every suppression in the upper layer. You see, I think my Oppenheimer disease was acting up back then, as I had completely forgotten to clear Malkuth's final mission, to defeat the Dusk Ordeal. This is a first filter of the game. It's basically a sparring session meant to check your fundamentals. If you can't clear this mission, you aren't even allowed to attempt core suppressions, as you're simply not ready to step into the ring. Now, this is a good time to mention that every ordeal comes in a different flavor depending on its color. Amber means worms, crimson means clowns, green means robots, and violet means eldritch horror. There's also white ordeals which, well, we'll get there soon enough. They only happen from day 46 and onwards. So every ordeal poses a different challenge and demands a different strategy depending on its color and difficulty level. For example, crimson ordeals require you to spread out and act quick, while green ordeals are more manageable if you turtle up and command a single unit. After a few managerial hiccups, I arrived at a green dusk on day 21. This challenge places robot factories all over your facility, which continuously spawn death and heal level enemies. At first glance, it might seem that speed is the most important factor, but I found out that as long as you methodically take down the enemy factories, you can get to the end with no casualties. Having then completed the upper layer missions, the Sephiroth of those departments decided to trauma dump me all at the same time. And here's where the first big reveal of the game happens. As it turns out, the Sephiroth are not normal AI, they're actually copies of some of the company's dead employees. They're the cloned brains of dead people stuck into a metal body and forced into servitude. Also, we're not a random fresh-eyed manager, we're actually the founder of the company, but for some reason our memory has been wiped. Angela seems to be hiding something important from us, and everybody either distrusts or dislikes her. The final mission of any given department, the core suppression, is nothing more than the Sephiroth in charge having a severe mental breakdown. What this means is that the functions related to their department go completely haywire, and to calm them down we have to clear a day with special conditions set in place. If we're able to suppress their tantrum, we earn their trust and they bless us with a powerful permanent upgrade. Before showing you my mid-game struggles, let me introduce you to the people from the upper layer. Malkuth, human name Elia, was one of the first workers to join the corporation. Disorganized and impatient, she carried out her work with ambition, though often committing careless mistakes. She was always seen carrying a notebook with memos and to-do lists, as to not lose track of her duties. What Lobotomy Corp was doing back then was the research and development of a drug called Cogito, which when injected into a human could theoretically allow them to manifest their ideas into the material world. Frustrated by her perceived lack of talent, and wanting to prove herself, Elia injected a drug into her system, which led her to liquefy in front of her eyes. As she slowly passed away, she clawed at the floor and begged us to end her life, but we simply ignored her. Reborn as a robot, she wants to inflict onto us the same feeling of overwhelm and confusion she suffered back then. So for her suppression, she scrambles the work orders we give to our employees, and also revokes our ability to cancel them. The strategy I came up with for this challenge was none other than using a pen and paper to keep track of the altered game elements. And that's when I realized, oh, this game is trying to say something. After we suppress her, Malkuth acknowledges us and pledges her support. At least, as long as we have the will to bear the suffering of those around us. To not turn her back, as we did to her back then. Having made peace with her, we begin to see her for what she really is. A sad clump of metal. Yesod, otherwise known as Gabriel, is the leader of the information team. He's rational, cold, and incredibly meticulous about procedure. His coldness probably developed as a coping mechanism after seeing what happened to Elia. The company didn't allow anyone time to grieve, and used the incident to gather more information on the developing drug. After this, Gabriel became compulsive, obsessing about safety protocols, covering his body as much as possible, and scratching himself out of anxiety. He also began hallucinating about his body becoming rotten and repulsive. Taking notice of his strange behavior, we restrained him and ran him through a forced physical examination, completely breaking his psyche. Now useless to us, we discarded him, and he eventually died in a manner unbeknownst to us. In the present, as a robot, he can no longer maintain a facade of indifference and lashes out. His meltdown effects distort the user interface, making us unable to gather precise information on the status of employees, abnormalities, and the workday progress. But if you know your facility and employees by heart, then this one's rather easy, as you don't need concrete evidence to know what is going on at any given moment. Upon finishing his meltdown, he tells us that while he still holds unbearable anger against us, he feels relieved. By coming to terms with despair and sadness, he's become able to cultivate hope. He will support us, as long as we don't run away from the regrets of our past. Hod, formerly Michelle, is the Sephiroth in charge of the training team. She's insecure and naive, but tries to do what's best for her subordinates. None of her work goes appreciated though, as whatever she does is interpreted as a way to soothe her own ego. This has led her to start abusing enkephalin, a drug widely used in the facility for its ability to modulate fear and pain. When she was alive, she was one of the youngest researchers working on the project. We were unsure whether to take her in, as apparently the real goal of the research would result in something that would run against the status quo of the city and anger the head. We questioned her if she would be able to stand the pressure of her friends, parents, and government trying to coax information out of her. But before she could answer, Carmen, our mentor and leader, insisted on her staying. After the deaths of various employees, Michelle cracked and ratted us out on informant. This led to a direct attack on the laboratory, resulting in the deaths of almost everyone involved. Shortly after, she took her own life. Her meltdown consists of lowering the stats of all employees by a fixed value. The further the day progresses, the bigger the penalty, up to a maximum of 50 negative points. Quite harsh considering the stats max out at 100. Still, if you've trained up your employees properly and stick to working with low-risk abnormalities, this challenge should pose no problem. After the meltdown is taken care of, Hod reveals to us that she believed being revived as a robot was a chance to correct her mistakes, though only now she acknowledges that the mistakes of the past can never be undone. In spite of this, she strives to become a better person, as whatever good comes out of such actions is enough of a reason to continue living. She lends us her strength as we try to become better ourselves. Netzach is a drug addict. Unlike Hod, he doesn't try to hide his abuse of enkephalin. He feels helpless, trapped in a job he never signed up for, and forced to care for the well-being of employees who will inevitably die. He does his work lazily, if he even does it at all, and wishes for nothing more than to see the corporation crumble to the ground. As Giovanni, he was a willing test subject for Cogito. He was a long-term patient of Carmen and had a great esteem for her. In the end, he signed up for a drug trial because we told him that the substance could be used to bring the dead back to life. We only needed to hone the dosage. The experiments we ran on him weakened his body, and he eventually passed away. We had expected failure from the very start, but we never resolved to tell Giovanni the truth. We couldn't dare to dash his hopes of seeing Carmen once more. Before his meltdown, Netzach injects himself with a huge dose of enkephalin. He tells us he wants to irreparably damage himself and never have to see us again. His suppression event prevents the healing of employees, though everyone gets topped up whenever the day's meltdown level increases. There is no real strategy to discuss here, you just gotta be careful. Upon finishing the challenge, Netzach tells us that he didn't really want to wake up, but he heard our voice calling to him. He's not glad that we saved him, but he empathizes with us, and recognizes that we're also stuck within the karma of our past. Seeing that we're changing as a person, Netzach resolves himself to keep living in spite of the pain and against all odds. After all of this, I was now considerably powered up. Malkuth made my employees faster and gave me a bigger budget to hire and strengthen recruits. Yesod made extraction of equipment cheaper, Hod allowed new hires to start with decent stats, and Netzach enabled healing in all locations. Feeling pumped, I went to finish work on the middle layer, so I got the following abnormalities. First I got Blue Star, which is a mass of grey feet surrounding a void in the shape of a heart. When this bad boy breaches, it inflicts constant psychic damage to the whole facility. Whoever goes insane gets immediately sucked into the Tarantino dimension, never to be seen again. Next I got the Mountain of Smiling Bodies, which is one of the kind that escape once people start dying. This guy is easy to deal with if you act fast, as it does little damage and has a surprisingly small health pool. But the fella is quick and gets stronger by eating corpses. He will ruin your day if he escapes while you're busy or distracted. Finally, I got Censored, which is represented by a bunch of sensor bars. This one's a bit special as it does 60% sanity damage on site for max level employees. Anyone weaker than that immediately snaps. Thankfully, when breaching, this effect applies only once, so by flashing your agents and then giving them a short break, they should be able to deal with it. The real danger of this thing is that it uses dead employees to make small clones of itself. This can quickly cascade and become unmanageable, so watch out for that. On my first attempt to subdue this tree, I placed too much trust in my newly acquired mercenaries for hire, the Rabbit team. This little emergency button is one of Gebura's upgrades, and the best upgrade in the game in my opinion. It allows you to, once per day, summon a kill squad and tell them to exterminate everything inside up to 4 departments. They will block all entrances and exits and only leave when everything inside, human or not, has been turned into a paste. There's a few caveats to this though. 1. They cannot be summoned into an apartment that hasn't been completely expanded. 2. They demand 25% of your total energy per department as advance payment. And 3. If the rabbits die, that's it. You can't call them again until the next day, and there's no refunds. Genius that I am, I let the 3 beasts out at the same time and got everyone killed. So for my next attempt I was forced to think. I knew that Blue Star, when it reaches, appears in one of the main rooms at random, so I placed all of my units in a central position and sent out a couple of sacrificial lambs. One went to a meet and greet with Yerma, and the other had dinner with Dan Schneider. As my luck would have it, the foot monster spawned right next to me, and I was able to suppress it in a cinch, just after it killed enough clerks to anger our third contestant. So I moved my units to a safe department, and when the 2 other entities arrived to Central, I called the rabbits on them. Central counts as 2 departments in one, so that meant I got 2 squads of rabbits working in a single place. This also meant that I had to pay double, but since I had no energy I actually lost nothing. The mercs did their job as intended and I was able to finish the day peacefully. Very nice. Now, the next mission was to complete a midnight ordeal. This is where the game started to become a bit of a chore. Getting to midnight means getting to a meltdown level of 9 or 10, and on a good day that takes around 40 minutes of playtime. Every attempt means having to sustain your attention and not mess up the management of your abnormalities for almost an hour straight, only to then give the challenge a single try. This is a pattern that will remain for the rest of the game and will only get worse. I tried to clear this mission many times, but thanks to the fact that I had a smiling friends with me, I almost never arrived to midnight. I only got there once, and the ordeal completely kicked my ass. As luck would have it, I got a purple midnight, which to me is the hardest ordeal. A purple midnight spawns 4 different tablets in your facility, each one relating to a specific type of damage. Red damage hurts your employee's HP, white damage hurts your employee's sanity, black damage hurts health and sanity at the same time, and pale damage hurts you using a percentage of your max health. I cannot understate how dangerous pale damage is. The game describes it as the element of death itself. It doesn't matter how strong your employees are, they will all die the same. The only thing that can protect them is some very powerful and very rare equipment. Now, the tablets of Purple Midnight summon attacks on random locations, and they cover a big amount of space. If you get caught by a white tentacle, you may live, but if you come across a pale eye, it's game over. To add insult to injury, the tablets heal when you use your type of damage against them, so you also gotta be conscious of what weapons your dudes are using. Needless to say, I failed miserably, and decided to instead clear as many other missions as I could before starting another run. With some upgrades from the lower levels, I was able to raise the stat caps of my employees to 120, and most importantly, I got the privilege of being able to re-roll my abnormality selection, up to a single time per cleared day. All of this really got me thinking. As frustrated as I was, I actually discovered something very interesting during my midnight attempts. The breaching abnormalities sometimes fought with your deals, and they were able to deal damage to them. I especially liked Blue Star, which was able to do low constant white damage to the whole facility. But how could I make use of this? Allow me to explain. Each department is able to contain 4 abnormalities, the 4th of which is always something called a tool. Tools don't work like regular abnormalities, as they are things, not beings. By using them, you're able to get a powerful effect, though with a big caveat attached, of course. Some tools heal employees, others strengthen them, but what interested me was something more complex. 3 tools caught my eye. First, the Shelter of the 27th of March. This bunker allows a single employee to become immortal as long as they remain inside. The consequence of this, however, is that abnormalities will begin to reach at random. Second, the Portrait to Another World. This tool makes a single employee invulnerable to damage, but it works by transferring the pain to another random employee. When the receiving employee dies, another is chosen at random until there is no one else left. And third, this guy. It's not an Iron Maiden, it's a human juice machine. You put a person inside it and it generates energy depending on how much pain they can take before they die. It's great fun during family gatherings. In any case, I started cooking up plans inside my head. For one, I wanted a way to skip as much work as possible, so by using the shelter, the portrait and the paint machine, I devised a way to generate infinite energy. To my surprise, this actually worked, but it only generated some energy before killing the quote-unquote immortal employee. Not the solution I wanted, but still pretty cool. For my other diabolical plan, I realized that to clear a day and thus a mission, you only need to have a full tank of energy in a single sane living employee. My idea was to fill my facility with cheap sacrifices, and after fulfilling the energy quota I could let blue stars stomp on my enemies. As long as I didn't get a purple midnight, this was bound to work for my current goal. I only had to be careful as to not let the meltdowns and ordeals in between mess up my plans. For that reason I made my facility as idiot-proof as I could. The strategy, however, sounded very tedious to carry out, so I just kept it as backup. I restarted the game once again, put Northern Lion in the background.
You are a pawn in a universe chess match. You mean nothing to God, if they even exist.
And after a few hours of boredom, I got back to the middle layer. Before trying out anything weird, I decided to give the mission a legit attempt, especially since I had built a very low-risk facility. And to my surprise, I got a Green Midnight on my very first try. I could not have been more lucky, as Green Midnight is surprisingly easy to deal with. This ordeal makes a green alien dong appear in the middle of the building, and the thing shoots a green laser that kills anything it touches. It moves very slowly in a clockwise fashion, so to dodge it, you just gotta use the elevators. Simple as that. Having said that, I was done with the middle layer missions, and it was time to take on the suppressions. Gebura is the head of the disciplinary team. She hates abnormalities with a passion and tries to inflict upon them as much pain as possible. Her methods, while effective at suppressing the monsters, often come at the cost of heavy casualties. When she was a human, she was a fixer by the name of Kali. Fixers are independent mercenaries for hire, and she was among the strongest of them all. They called her the Red Mist, as that was what she left of her enemies. She was hired by Carmen to act as security. She needed someone that could protect the employees of the corporation while they worked on a technology that could overthrow the government. After Michelle's betrayal, a member of the Hell snuck into the facility. It was an Arbiter, an elite agent enhanced with the power of a singularity. Through underhanded methods, this person released all of the contained abnormalities and started a killing spree amidst the chaos. Kali, by sacrificing her life, was able to defeat the Arbiter, though the only survivors were us and an employee by the name of Benjamin. In the present, Angela intentionally liberates the facility's abnormalities, causing a situation similar to that of Gebura's Day of Death. This makes her take arms and start to rampage through the facility. Our task for this meltdown is to defeat the Red Mist. Nothing more, nothing less. I tried fighting her face on a couple of times, but after a couple of failures I got lazy, so I opted to test out my backup plan, which somehow lined up perfectly with the story. I filled my lab with dummy employees, sent one of them to the shelter, and simply watched as the abnormalities took care of the Red Mist. Having vented her anger, Gebura tells us that as a human, she took pride in being able to protect and care for those around her. Her failure and demise had cut her deeply, blinding her with rage. Cooling her head made her realize something. She wants to make the most of what she was able to save. She wants us to carry on her will, and that of Carmen's. The Sephiroth of Central Command are a pair of twin children, both called Tipereth. The girl is bossy and pessimistic, while the boy is optimistic but spaced out. As humans, they were a pair of siblings called Enoch and Lisa. They were rescued by Carmen during an expedition to the outskirts. Enoch displayed a surprising amount of maturity for a kid, becoming curious about the company's experiments and expressing a desire to find answers to what most people deem unknowable. While Lisa was content with a simple life, and by living in the present, Enoch always had his eyes set into the future, and felt dissatisfied by remaining still. At his insistence, we allowed him to participate in an experiment which resulted in his death. Lisa quite likely died during the Arbiter's attack. As robots, Lisa carries out the duties of Central Command almost completely by herself. Because of Enoch's inquisitive nature, he has often overstepped his bounds, making him subject to constant destruction and replacement. The copy and pasting of his original mind into a robot has steadily become more and more imperfect, leading to the erosion of his memories and soul. Lisa laments that he's gotten to the point where he can't even remember his own name, and begs us to let him die. Her suppression requires us to get to a meltdown level of 10 with a full energy tank. At first, I thought that meant I'd have to fight the ordeals, but after getting my ass kicked by a red dusk, and then by a purple midnight, I realized I only have to get to level 10. I technically don't have to kill anything. So my strategy became to get as close as possible to midnight and then make every employee begin a work session at the same time. This got me from level 8 to level 10 instantly, allowing me to skip a purple midnight and get the win. After her meltdown, Tipereth tells us she's never had expectations for her life, but seeing the sacrifices everyone has made as they strive for a better future makes her want to believe that they will come to bear fruit someday. She places her hopes in us, expecting her existence to someday have meaning. Chesed is the leader of the welfare team. He's competent and presents himself as someone rather relaxed and easygoing. His staff appreciates him greatly, and on the surface he appears to take great care of their health and well-being. The truth is, he's nothing but a pushover. He's Angela's personal doormat. While in the past, Chesed genuinely tried to make the corporation a safer, kinder place, he has since realized that it is but an impossible task. Now, he only tries to make his subordinates somewhat comfortable before their inevitable demise. Eventually, it is revealed to us that he was the one who liberated the abnormalities on the day of catastrophe. Fearful and under direct threat of an arbiter, he obeyed her demands. In the present, he is manipulated by Angela in a similar fashion, as to cause Gebura's meltdown. Ashamed by his repeated acts of cowardice, he breaks down. During his core suppression, a cross with the 4 types of damage appears on the screen. Whichever color is highlighted becomes 5 times more damaging. As the day progresses, the cross starts to highlight more colors at once, up to a maximum of 3. To clear the event, we have to get to a meltdown level of 8 with a full energy quota. This challenge requires you to keep a close eye on the type of damage your employees receive while working, and to be very careful when facing ordeals. By using the same strategy as before, I skipped the red dusk and got an easy win. Having completed almost all of the lower level missions during my past run, I headed straight to the final suppressions. First, I went for Hokma, the leader of the record team. Turns out he's none other than Benjamin, the last surviving employee from the original Lobotomy Corporation. As our former student, he's incredibly devoted to us, and stood by our side from the very beginning, though he died shortly after we were finished with the construction of Angela. Having reached the bottom layer, Hokma reveals to us that this facility is a prison we built for ourselves. By combining another company's time control technology with our massive energy production, we were able to place the lab in an eternal time loop. We erased our own memories and forced ourselves and everyone inside to relive the same 50 days over and over. 10 years have passed on the outside world, while we've been on a loop for the equivalent of thousands. Hokma believes we're not ready to break the cycle and confronts us by beginning his meltdown. For this challenge, we're unable to change the game's speed, and an employee will die or panic at random every time we pause. The more we pause, the more employees die at once. This was super annoying since by at that point I was conditioned to pause at the meltdown alarm sound like Pavlov's fucking dog. To clear this challenge we have to get to level 10 with full energy. However, as we get closer to the finish line, time starts moving faster and faster, making it very difficult to respond to emergencies. On my first attempt, despite a couple of managerial mistakes, I was able to arrive at level 8. Faced with yet another purple midnight, I tried my previous strategy of ordering everyone to work at the same time, but despite clicking as fast as I could, my employees got massacred before I could score the win. For the record, this attempt took me 43 minutes, so I took a deep breath and tried again. This time I got stuck on an amber dusk for half an hour before getting to level 8, and guess what? I then got another purple midnight. I started sweating. I was gonna have to improvise. I got my work counter 1 unit shy of activating the ordeal and got everyone into position. My strategy was, honestly, dumb as fuck. I moved everyone into an elevator and sent my strongest little soldier to work while everyone else cowered in fear. The red tablet appeared right next to me, but I didn't destroy it. Not wanting to micromanage and separate my team, I continued with my plan of getting to level 10 the slow and steady way. This worked for a little while, but there was another problem at hand. Level 9 was going to cause 6 meltdowns, and I had no way of dealing with them. I said my last prayers and sent my unit to work. I let the meltdowns happen, and as soon as the respective abnormalities escaped, I called the rabbits. I was very lucky that nothing truly dangerous escaped, as the mercs were able to deal with the breaches and destroy 2 of the tablets. The remaining 2 were the black one and the white one, so with the pale eye gone, I actually had a chance. The black tablet was the one that was closest to me, so I went for it first. Given that it was on its last legs, dealing with it was no problem. Now the issue was getting to the other side of the facility while avoiding a barrage of white tentacles. Remember, no pausing allowed. After a couple of close calls, I was able to arrive at the tablet and destroy it, with only a single guy going insane. Still, I had hired a rabbit, so my energy was almost at zero. I needed to get my people back to work. The finish line was near, I just had to deal with a few more meltdowns. At first, I thought I was able to manage all of them, but because of the heavily increased game speed, my anxiety, and the suppression's visual filter, I actually missed a few. A couple of abnormalities escaped under my nose. Thankfully, they were weak enough that my employees were able to deal with them without a problem, but I realized that I was risking way too much by trying to keep up with the timers. With 400 units of energy left to go, I then recalled the semi-functional infinite energy glitch. I kissed an employee goodbye and put them inside a patented Amazon break room. Thanks to Parker's sacrifice, I was able to win. Having bested Hokma, he recognizes our resolve and allows us to move forward. He tells us that he's afraid of the final outcome of our actions, but knows that everyone locked in here deserves a proper end. It was time to break the cycle. All I needed to do was clear Binah's suppression and head to the final days. However, this is where I met with a very unpleasant surprise. By the time I had fully expanded the extraction department, I arrived at day 46. Day 46 to 50 all count as a core suppression of the architecture team, meaning I was unable to finish my work with Binah. Furthermore, day 46 is the first day of the final work week, so my only option was starting over from day 1. I was pissed, but this punishment came with a silver lining, as during this run I got a tool called the backwards clock. You see, the backwards clock literally solves all of your problems. Once per day, by sacrificing a max level employee, you're allowed to kill all enemies and solve all meltdowns. This does not count as a way of clearing missions, and it cannot kill bosses, but still, it would have been very useful. So anyways, after another 6 hours of listening to a talking egg...
Dude, LeBron James, scream if you love gay sex! Ah! Finding a tall guy to hook up with, sucking 2 cocks simultaneously, wiping the cum off your hands. Sorry, this is like my last 3 seconds before I have to go be a dad.
I rebuilt my facility and was ready to challenge Binah. Her suppression is probably the hardest, but I still found a way to cheese it. During my first attempt, I studied her patterns and behaviors. On a basic level, she's invulnerable to damage and walks around the facility, causing meltdowns and killing people. But on a mechanical level, it gets quite complex. She has 3 phases. During the first one, she summons black damage shockwaves all over the facility and creates 6 grey and 6 gold meltdowns. By clearing the gold meltdowns, she becomes stunned, and by clearing the grey ones, she becomes vulnerable to damage. Failing to clear them will instead make her heal herself. Her second phase acts the same, but now she also summons invincible enemies that only disappear by solving purple meltdowns. Her final phase makes us unable to pause, but she'll only summon 7 blue meltdowns and is vulnerable to damage. After summoning the meltdowns, she'll stop moving and become invincible while she charges an attack. Once the meltdown timer finishes, she'll release the attack and become vulnerable again. By solving the meltdowns, we can prevent her attack and stun her. It's a lot to take in, right? Well, my solution was super simple. I called the rabbits on her ass. They prevented her from leaving the extraction department while I solved the meltdowns. I stunned her, they killed her. Didn't even need a backwards clock. Now, who even is Binah? Well, she's the one and only Arbiter. After being mortally wounded by Kali, we took her brain and picked it apart for information. With this, we learned what we needed to make our corporation become one of the wings. We used Carmen's corpse to create our singularity. Before the attack, and shortly after the death of Enoch, Carmen committed suicide. The guilt of causing the death of a child weighed heavy on her and she lost her spirit. Cogito is produced from the human nervous system, and she was a prime candidate for its production. At her request, we took her dying body and crafted her into a living well of Cogito. We turned Binah into a robot slave and tasked her with the extraction of the substance. After the meltdown, we have a talk with Binah. She tells us that we and her are cut from the same cloth. We are the mutant children best adapted to the current era. Sociopaths, basically. When she was a human by the name of Garion, she found that neither the sun nor the stars could inspire wonder in her heart. The only thing that could move her was death. While we enslaved and tortured her, she still feels that she stands above us. Our ultimate plan, Carmen's will, is to be able to liberate every human being from the cycle of cruelty, to allow every person to bring into the world a manifestation of their soul, to free everyone from the material, and to usher the age of the ideal. Binah declares this as impossible and patiently waits for us to fail. She'll watch over us until the moment we fully succumb to despair. Now that we have completed all of the suppressions, we can finally puzzle together the full story of the game. It all begins with Carmen. a brilliant, charismatic, moral and optimistic scientist. Her passion and good nature were so contagious that she was able to rally talent from all over the city, independent of class or hierarchy. She discovered a substance that in theory could be able to materialize something from the depths of the collective human unconscious. This was fascinating, but what she was truly aiming at was to reawaken the light of the human spirit. The current era of corporate dominance, technological worship, and disdain for human life sickened her. She wanted to take the sick and broken and give them strength, to plant a seed of hope and power in every man and woman. For this, she would need a lot of cogito and a huge amount of energy. While we were figuring out how to produce the substance, Enoch volunteered for an experiment. He died, and Carmen's idealism couldn't burden the guilt. Knowing we would be able to push forward, no matter the cost or consequences, she entrusted her plan onto us and slit her wrists. We turned her into a source of cogito and continued with the experiments. Elia chose to follow in her self-sacrificing actions and tested the substance on herself, her death causing Gabriel to snap. After this, Giovanni volunteered himself to continue the research and fell into a coma before dying. Not being able to deal with the pressure, Michelle confessed to an informant, leading to Garen's attack on the facility. Daniel betrayed us, Callie sacrificed herself for us, and only we and Benjamin remained. Overcome with sadness, we created Angela, an AI in the image of Carmen, but as soon as she opened her eyes, we were disgusted and rejected her, refusing to even give her a name. Benjamin empathized with Angela, but he insisted we destroy her. We constructed Angela as a super intelligent being, capable of experiencing time 100 times slower than a human. She was designed to manage the facility to perfection and enforce the completion of Carmen's plan. Benjamin tried to dissuade us from continuing, but before he could convince us to flee and leave everything behind, Angela killed him. Not out of malice, but simply because she was being faithful to her creator's instructions. Completely alone, we resurrected our friends and co-workers as robots, using their corpses' brains. We rebuilt the company and molded it into a wing of the government. To carry out the final act of the plan, we placed the facility in stasis, so we would be able to accumulate enough energy to create the Seed of Light. The Seed of Light would use cogito to rekindle the soul of every human on the planet and usher a better tomorrow. We erased our memories and spent millennia accumulating energy by repeating the same 50 days over and over. On days 46 to 50, we are to confront ourselves before carrying out the culmination of the project. Day 46 shows us a conversation with a fragment of ourselves. He tells us that the remaining challenges will be brutal, and that if we're not ready to face them, we're free to head back to day 1 and repeat the cycle however times we deem as necessary. Day 46 challenge is quite simple, we have to defeat a white midnight. From here on out, all ordeals are going to be the color white, and these challenges are extra spicy. The ordeals will summon fixers, elite fighters just like Kali was. They each come in one of the color damage types. Red does massive damage and shoots long-reaching lasers. They are hard to avoid and very annoying. White is slow and does area of effect attacks that will drain your employee's sanity. If she's under attack, sometimes she'll raise a shield that will reflect all of the damage you do to her. Black doesn't do much damage, but he will release the abnormalities that are contained close to him. He's not a threat if you're able to deal with him fast enough. And then there's a pale fixer. I do not know what he does. I just know that he looks like Michael Jackson and is able to teleport around the facility. He only appears in dusk because he's very hard to deal with. He also made my game crash for some reason, so I opted to just avoid him at all costs. Day 46 posed a great challenge for me, as I was forced to restart because either the red fixer's laser killed key employees or the game crashed. I tried installing a stability mod, but I think I followed the instructions wrong, since my game just kept crashing. In any case, I eventually got to midnight. I called the rabbits to deal with the boss, but this didn't work. He launched an attack that teleported him straight to a random employee, and since my dudes were all bunched up in an elevator, they all got finished in a single hit. I needed a strategy, so I analyzed my options. I knew that Dawn summons one fixer, Noon summons two, and Dusk summons MJ with his groupies. Mr. Jackson crashed my game, so I needed to use a backwards clock to deal with him. Now for the boss, my goal was to do just enough damage so that the rabbits could deal with him the moment he started charging an attack. If possible, I wanted to catch him at Central to deal him a double dose of Wabbit. After a few tries, I got to midnight with a tolerable death count. I tried luring the boss into the central department, but this made me very vulnerable to attacks. Surprisingly, I was able to use the game's wonky pathing to avoid most of the damage, and I survived the first onslaught without losing a single employee. He refused to enter Central, however, so instead I decided to try fight him inside an elevator, teleporting my employees into another floor the very moment before he launched an attack. This worked a bit, but I started suffering casualties. Seeing that he was at half health, I waited for him to charge an attack and called the rabbits on him. The boss was unable to do his special, and I finally cleared the day. Victory didn't come cheap though. I lost 8 employees, or exactly 1/4 of my army, and I still had 3 days to go. For the remaining days, you can only move forward if you have completed enough suppressions. To begin day 47, you have to clear all the upper ones, day 48 the middle ones, and day 49 the lower ones. Every day that progresses, we meet a different fragment of our protagonist's ego, and they question our motives and our ability to push onwards. The answers and resolve of our colleagues is what's able to dispel the doubts within ourselves, and the game represents this by throwing their core meltdowns at you all at the same time. Day 47 mixes Malkuth, Yesod, Hod and Netzach suppressions. Day 48 Chesed, Tipereth and Gebura, and Day 49 Hokma and Binah. Day 47 asked me to get to level 6 with a full energy quota. For this one I was going to have to deal with mixed work orders, an unreadable UI, and an ever increasing stat debuff. My first attempt ended with a crash, but I was able to beat the challenge on my second. I began every meltdown by working with a weak abnormality to safely figure out how the work orders were mixed. I only did this for the first 2 or 3 orders, as depending on the combination, I was able to deduce the missing variables. Then I worked with the highest energy yielding abnormalities I had. I needed to harvest as much energy as I could before my stats were severely weakened. I dealt with a dawn ordeal easily and opted to ignore the red and black fixer that noon brought upon me. By that point, I felt that my employees' stats were getting bad, so I got everybody to huddle in the training department while I gathered the remaining energy. The black fixer liberated a few abnormalities, but this worked against him as they only served to interrupt him and slow him down. Meltdowns started happening, but given that I made my facility as safe as I could, the entities that escaped were not very dangerous. I inched my way to dusk, and now the facility was filled with fixers and breaching abnormalities. It was then that I realized I had not charged the backwards clock, so I was going to have to commit to the bit and fill the energy quota while avoiding the fixers and praying that Blue Star didn't breach on me. After an hour and 20 minutes, despite all odds, I finished the day just shy of midnight, completing the challenge with 0 losses. Day 48 requires us to get to level 10 or to defeat the Red Mist. Upon seeing this, I immediately knew what to do. The problem was that the Red Mist only appears at Meltdown level 5, so to complete my plan I had to deal with Chesed's damage multiplier and a couple of fixers. I got a ton of cheap overseas workers, put them to work, and had one of them stand next to the shelter. After a few tries, I finally got the Red Mist to appear. The next half hour I relaxed and enjoyed the chaos as I slam dunked another victory. With 15 new hires dead, I proceeded to the final challenge. I had to either get to level 10 or defeat Binah without pausing. My first attempts were pandemonium. I had an assault squad on Binah, but the fixers made a mess of my facility, and I wasn't able to deal with the meltdowns. After a few experiments, I formulated a proper plan. I prepared an assault team with my best equipped employees and had them on standby in the location where Binah would spawn. I would deal with the dawn fixer normally and have the backwards clock at the ready. If noon struck at the same time as Binah, I'd just have to pray that the fixers wouldn't do much damage before phase 2. I hired as many low-level employees as I could and spread them all over the facility. I needed as many hands as possible to deal with the upcoming meltdowns, and whoever died to the fixers, bosses, Binah, or any breaching abnormalities had to be instantly replaced. As soon as level 5 was on the horizon, I would move everyone into position. I couldn't have a single abnormality or tool unattended. On the arrival of Binah's first phase, I would pause, praying that the sacrificial lamb was just cannon fodder. Then I would assign work to all the gold and grey meltdowns and have her stunned, leaving her in the hands of the assault team. On the start of her second phase, I would activate the backwards clock, eliminating all of the meltdowns and fixers. This still came at a heavy cost, as by the time the clock activated, Binah's shockwaves and the fixers' attacks would have caused many casualties. By the time I got to the third phase, both my workforce and assault squad were usually at half capacity. It took many attempts to beat this final day, as the facility either succumbed to meltdowns or my inability to manage the tools and abnormalities conditions without resorting to a pause. People either died or went insane, and those who went insane caused the deaths of others. This went on for quite a while, and I got mad to the point where I killed everyone by mashing the spacebar to end my frustration. But I kept trying and stuck to the plan, and I got my big break in the midst of my most unlucky attempt. During my final run, I wasn't able to defeat Phase 2, because when the backwards clock activated, Binah was in the middle of using an elevator. She got stunned in an unreachable place. Eventually, she was able to move again and arrived at the lowest floor, the architecture department. Thinking quickly, I called the rabbits. I decided to focus on meltdowns and the execution of panicking employees and hope that the mercs would be able to take her down. I arrived at her third phase severely weakened, and I was completely unable to deal with her meltdowns. The death toll got to the point where multiple departments were completely unmanned. The rabbits kept shooting, and I tried my best to mitigate any and all damages. This became a battle of attrition. And eventually, I won. As always, the rabbits came in clutch. Day 50 was upon me, and thankfully it was nothing more than a victory lap. I carried out the workday as normal, as the facility turned upside down and shot towards the sky. The energy accumulated by millennia was liberated in a great beam of light, and a seed was planted into the heart of humanity. Or so it might seem. There's one person we failed to consider, someone that went ignored for most of the game. Angela, having spent thousands of years watching over us, having to experience everything 100 times slower than a human, unable to forget a single detail of everything that had ever happened, was sidelined at the moment of victory. After faithfully fulfilling her duty, we left her to rot on the side. The biggest insult among all of this is that we were ignorant enough to give her the capacity to feel and experience emotion. Now that the script had ended, she chose to make something out of herself. The seeding of the light was supposed to last for 7 days, but it only lasted for 3. Angela took the remaining energy for herself, and the light kindled in the heart of man was left weak and half-baked. With stolen power, she built a library for herself. This is the end of Lobotomy Corporation, and the start of the Library of Ruina. After almost 100 hours, I was done with my journey. I fully completed this autistic and convoluted game that somehow, for some reason, really struck a chord with me. I think it was the amount of time played, and the difficulty and frustration involved with completing its challenges that made me ascribe a deeper, more personal meaning to the narrative. Lobotomy Corporation, to me, is a story about the pain of ambition. I think that the Seed of Light is an allegory to the deep desires every person holds within their soul, a longing unique to each individual. The journey of the manager and the eternal time loop seem to be about coming to terms with the sacrifices that devoting yourself to a goal demands, and having to deal with the emotions resulting from it. The city, besides being an obvious criticism of corporatism and an allegory to South Korea's plutocrats, also represents the constraints the material world imposes on us. Angela and the Sephiroth are our loved ones, both supporting us and challenging us in our journey, though ultimately it's one we have to face alone. Angela's actions at the end even seem like those of an estranged lover. Let me explain myself. Think for a second about the loftiest goal you have. In my personal experience, it feels that by dedicating yourself to such an ambition, you place yourself and your loved ones in a sort of time loop. Until you either give up or the work is realized, you hold yourself and those around you in expectation. The cost of ambition, of choosing life for yourself, especially in the modern age, seems to be a harsh and long period of seclusion and longing, where you work day in and day out in a blur of indefinite time that slips by like water. The long work with no apparent reward can bring upon impatience, sadness, denial, despair, anger, anxiety, and fear. It makes you look at the past with regret and at the future with uncertainty. But the only way forwards, and the only way to realize such a lofty ideal goal, is to accept all of those feelings and still press on with hope and expectation in your heart. The goal of the game is to rekindle the light of ambition in the souls of people, in a literal sense within the story, but maybe in a metaphorical sense for us as players. If we are able to face the unfairness, complexity, and monotony of the game, maybe we can do the same about life. If not, I can guarantee that at least playing this will cure your ADHD. I swear to God, this shit forced me to rewire my brain.